Welcome to Season 4 of Might in Motion, the podcast that champions motivation, momentum, mindfulness, and might. I'm Mariana Kinney, your host, bringing you conversations with inspiring leaders and innovators who challenge the status quo and push boundaries in their careers and lives. Whether you're here to grow, lead, or ignite your own journey, we're here to keep you moving forward. Let's dive in. Today, I am thrilled to bring to you Michelle Livingstone. She's an experienced transportation and supply chain professional. She serves on public and private boards, a consultant, an adjunct professor at the Transportation and Supply Chain Institute at the University of Denver. Her extensive experience with more than 30 years of transportation and supply chain experience in retail and direct to consumer, as well as in the consumer products industry, has served her well. She was an officer in a Fortune 50 company for over 13 years and now serves on public, private, and nonprofit boards as an adjunct professor at the University of Denver and the Supply Chain Institute. In addition, she's founded her own consulting organization, and she assists companies and individuals with their supply chain challenges and leadership opportunities. Michelle, welcome to Might in Motion.
Thank you, Mariana. I'm delighted to be your guest today.
This is really fun for me because I had the distinct privilege of being part of your team at the Home Depot, and it was truly a pleasure to work underneath you and learn from you. And now I'm excited to share your story and your message with so many more young people in the supply chain profession and their careers. So I want to know you've had this really long career in supply chain. What's your origin story? What was that one thing that just sparked this interest in supply chain, which traditionally has not been a female industry, right? It's typically male dominated. So what was that one thing that you just got you hooked?
Yeah, thanks, Mariana. That's a great question. And I can say it was actually my father. He was in transportation. He worked for small, less than truckload and truckload companies while I was growing up. So the majority of my life and most of his was in the trucking industry. And when I was at Indiana University, I knew I wanted to be a business major, but I kind of did the normal accounting and finance and marketing. And frankly, none of those really resonated with me too much. And there was a transportation degree at the time, and it was a very small portion of the school. So there were 33,000 students that were going to IU at the time, and there were 33 people in this transportation program as part of the business school. And not surprising, there were only a handful of women in that group. And so I took the obligatory transportation intro level class, and I was shocked by how much I knew based on dinner conversations with my dad. And I would just tell you, as everyone out there, when you're talking to your kids about your day and what it is that you do, even though they're rolling their eyes and making, googly noises, they're actually absorbing something. And so I was just really shocked at how much I knew just from those dinner conversations. So because there were very few women at the time, I thought, well, wow, there might be an opportunity to leverage this. And so I went ahead, and my concentration was in transportation, and I came out to the real world doing what I went to school for. So not a lot of folks in transportation have that to claim, but I do. And I've never been disappointed. I've enjoyed each and every day.
Well, I love how you mentioned that how much you absorbed as a kid from your father, because, there were so many times that I'm picking up my kids from daycare and I'm on a conference call while I'm picking them up and talking supply chain with them, that now, when we're driving 285 or 75, most of the big interstates here in Georgia, and they'll look over and they're like, "Oh, Mom, that's a flatbed," or that's this, that's that. I'm like, "Yay, okay, you gained something that I didn't think that they would have even been listening to." But now, they have, and even with school projects, like one of my daughters actually built, a 53-foot trailer, out of cardboard, just talking about like how you get product into a trailer and, using a ramp, because that was their science project, right? So it's really cool that impacted you at a young age. And I'm seeing that now with another generation of women, and hopefully maybe they'll get into to supply chain in the future. You never
Well,
know.
I hope so. We need more women, and anything that we can do to attract and retain women, and the diversity, improve the diversity overall, is a really important thing in the industry. I will share the one quick thing though. The one bit of advice that my dad gave me was, he said, always be on the customer side, because it's a lot more fun to be on the customer side. And I held true to that advice that he provided, and I certainly have no regrets. But now that I've had an opportunity to serve on the board of Werner Enterprises and really have seen the other side, you know, I got to tell you that the carrier side is equally exciting, and there was probably something to be said for being on the shipper side and then moving to the carrier side, and then kind of deciding from there, once you have that end-to-end experience, what resonates best. So I will always appreciate and value the advice my dad gave me. But as a parent, I try to make sure that I don't say something that's so definitive that you think you can't back out of it. So
Yeah, I
that
mean,
was my key lesson.
I love that thought process, because I actually, my career started with Saya Motor Freight as an intern. You're doing time studies with basically day freight LTL drivers, right? So, I started there, then became, with like from a Home Depot perspective, and then now on the supply chain IT side. And every single aspect has its own perks and, opportunities. But when you can take those relationships that you've made and understanding that impact, I think it really has that longer term impact on your joy in your career, right? And you're really known for building relationships. So is there, kind of words of wisdom or something that really helped you as you went through your career of building positive supply chain relationships, which to me is more than just the trucking company with the customer, but also, with merchants or with, with all these different partners that you have? How did you go about building those kind of positive relationships?
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate being known for that. Actually, I'm not sure that I had ever heard it put in that way. But the good news is, I really appreciate and value people. I like their opinions. I want to work with them collaboratively. And I think part of it is just the fact that I do want to learn, and I do want to come to the best outcome. And I think when everyone is working toward the same goal, it helps things solidify how you want to deal with one another. And, a career can be a really long time. and what goes around comes around. And
Yes.
how you treat others could very well come back to haunt you if you're not cognizant of the impact that you're having on their life, and vice versa. And perhaps this goes back to another thing my dad said. He always told me to be careful of the toes that you step on today, for they could be connected to another part of their body that you'll regret tomorrow. So that was also good advice from my dad.
Yeah, I mean, it's really true. And I think supply chain is, as a whole, it's a relationship, and it's working together, it's creating those positive partnerships is what helps, I think, everybody in the regardless of which side of the fence you're on, right? You have the ability to impact so many others. And one thing I tell my current team, but even prior teams, is seek to understand why somebody's asking what they're asking, because there's more to it, and that it's really important.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I like that. I think that Stephen M. Covey, seek to understand, and it goes a long way. And I will tell you, most people do not understand transportation. That, if you're in merchandising or store operations or any other part of the company, transportation to so many is a necessary evil. That's the way it's viewed, and it's a relatively large expense item on the P&L. And folks, frankly, would much prefer to make decisions without transportation in the room, so they don't get bogged down in details. It's like, well, so part of it is the need to do an outreach to everyone to make sure that they understand what they're asking, and what the actual cost impact is, and the service impact, and all of that. So part of it is really just needing to make sure that you are connecting with everyone. Otherwise, you'll easily be thrown under the bus.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I would think from the other side too, when you pull in a supply chain partner and you create a true partnership, your supply chain partners can actually help you make your numbers, right? They can help with your margin. They can help with your in-stock percentage, um, in ways that, I think at the surface people don't realize.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's a bit of an education process.
For sure. One of the you're kind of known for these Michelleisms, like there were things that I remember like don't be a zero, be a hero, so don't come into work, coughing all over everybody, which turned out to be a really good piece of advice. Never waste a good crisis. Was another one that I loved. And then, you want good news to travel fast and bad news to travel faster. So when I think of crisis and bad news, and I think of, oh my goodness, like, do I really want to bring that to my boss's boss's boss? How did you foster an environment that was like, hey, it's okay to come to the table and say, this might be going sideways. Let's work together to try to fix it.
It really is part of the culture of the group, and you have to make sure that folks feel that emotional safety, that if they do come with bad news, that the messenger is not going to be killed. And that's really, really important. And you have to demonstrate that time after time. You can't just do it once. You have to make sure that everyone feels that emotional security and that it is okay to bring bad news. And, I always encouraged everyone to just tell me the way it is. Don't you put any spin on it. Just give it to me straight. We can deal with anything if we know exactly what we're dealing with. But so often folks feel a need to provide just the level of information they think that you need to know. And that's why you have to go back and you have to ask why 5 times. You may remember another Home Depot leader at the time touting that, ask questions why 5 times. And it turns out that that's actually sage advice, because that allows you to get to the real root cause of the opportunity and helps you solve the problem faster than if someone just said, well, the load's late. Okay, why is the load late? And then you just keep asking and asking and asking. And then pretty soon you realize that you have an issue in the distribution center that you might have very easily solved the wrong problem.
Yeah, 100%. And being willing to listen to that, I think is key, right? And associates want to know that they can speak maybe that issue, but know that they're going to be heard. And I love that that's creating that safety, that emotional safety. Now, you talk a little bit about how when you retired, you weren't retiring, you were rewiring. So what has been your most exciting adventure since the great rewiring?
Yeah, thank you. I shamelessly plagiarized the rewirement from Carol Tomei when she was CFO at Home Depot and then moved on to be CEO of UPS. That's a very different rewirement than what I've chosen to do, but I really appreciated that term because one of the things I learned pretty early on is that work was my hobby and I loved work, and I really didn't know how to, I didn't really have any big interests outside of work. So for me, what rewirement meant is that I wanted to continue to stay in the industry and be engaged on multiple levels. However, I also wanted a little more flexibility. That's really, I think, what in the end I was striving for. And there are certain things, and particularly being on a board of a public company, there's kind of a sweet spot when it makes sense to join that board so that you can get the full benefit of being on the board. And if you wait too late, some boards have mandatory age requirements and those other things. So it's like, you know what, I need to take the leap and do it now, even though it didn't necessarily feel like I was ready for it. But I was so happy when it all came together. But it takes a minute. And everyone who thinks, oh, retirement is just so easy, it may be for some people, but for a lot of us who are involved and fast-paced and enjoy that and like those conversations with wicked smart people every day and trying to solve big problems, when you don't have that, it can be a little unsettling. So it took a minute for everything to fall in place, but now I really enjoy the mix of the board work for both public and private, as well as nonprofits. And I've recently added advisory board to that title as well. And then that also gave me an opportunity to become an adjunct professor, which, if truth be known, at one point in my life, teacher is all I really wanted to be. But I learned at a really young age that I was never going to live the lifestyle I wanted to become accustomed to on a teacher salary, which is such a sad statement. but it is true. But now it all came together. So now, being able to be an adjunct professor in the Transportation Supply Chain Institute at the University of Denver has just been great because it keeps me connected to everyone. I continue to learn new and exciting things and bring my knowledge base to a set of high potential leaders, future leaders in the industry. So it's really worked out well.
That's awesome. I think it's, continuing to learn is so critical. And I'll probably be a little bit like you that when I get to the point where it's time to rewire, I don't know if I'll ever really stop, because I'm used to every moment being scheduled, even when I go on vacation, everything's scheduled, which might be why I'm in supply chain. I don't know. But, I love keeping to a good plan. You're now kind of in this different phase and you're seeing these visions of industry come to light. What do you think is going to be the next big innovation in transportation in the next 5 years?
That's a great question. And my crystal ball is a little fuzzy, to be honest with you. But I do believe that AI and generative AI is going to play a much bigger role. And it might actually surpass the autonomous vehicles that we've talked about for so many years, which personally I'm, being a child of the Jetson age, I love that idea of the autonomous vehicles. But chances are, I think the AI and generative AI will have a much bigger impact. When you think about what it can already do, and then as the industry continues to grow and evolve, the potential is very high in terms of being able to, solve problems and communicate faster and, maybe help relieve some of the drivers' angst on all sorts of, communication and those kinds of things. And just the ability to have more data, more high quality data faster, I think is tremendous.
Do you think there's a potential there from a shrink security type scenario and cargo theft from an AI perspective, like being able to recognize if a bill of lading has been monkeyed with, an 8 becomes a 3 magically, on a count, that sort of thing. Do you think there is a future for that leveraging AI technology, or do you think it's more on the data analytics, or but maybe it's both?
I think both, actually. I believe the capabilities are out there to be able to do both. And it makes it for a really exciting time. And I'm hoping with that capability that will continue to attract and retain folks who previously may have decided to go into a different industry. Maybe they'll be interested in coming into transportation supply chain because of the innovation and support for that technology that I think is so important.
Yeah, it really is. It's fun. It's a fun space to be in. And where I think is to your point, where companies are going, where industry is going, what used to be the biggest advancement was the fax machine is now, everybody's phone and, the telematics and things like that. There's so much more to technology that's being leveraged even from 5 years ago today, which is really, really cool to be a part of.
Yes, it is.
So if you could go back, now, so we were talking about the future, right? If you could go back, 10, 15 years ago and have coached yourself from back then, is there any advice you would have given yourself that maybe somebody can learn from today as they're in their career?
I certainly am very fortunate that I have no regrets. However, if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have done a few things different. And one of those is I am very deep in transportation. I shared up front that I was a business major with a concentration in transportation. I love transportation. I see why my dad was in it forever and a day. And I feel like every day I came into work, it was new and exciting. However, there comes a point in your career when you realize, well, I am not going to be able to be my boss's replacement. I'm not going to be on that succession plan because I don't have all of the components, because I kept being rewarded and recognized in transportation. It's like, sure, let me take that surefire promotion. Of course, I'm going to do that. And then you realize it's very hard at one point to be able to move cross functionally. Not that it's impossible, but it just takes a lot more effort, and you have to do uh, a lot more selling yourself that you're capable of doing other things besides your current role that I didn't do. So chances are I probably would have, and I do recommend to others that they look more for those lateral moves, and that it may take you a little longer to get where you're going, but ultimately you can leapfrog to ultimately where you want to be, and that might be more valuable in the end.
Yeah, I think that that diversity of experience, can be really impactful. It goes back to the relationships because now you kind of have an understanding where like different pieces of the pie fit together, you
Yes.
know. Um, and so the last question I really want to ask about is, you've had this really phenomenal career. You're obviously someone who is kind of like in that the go-getter, you've had different job moves and increased, workload or expectations. How did you, or is it maybe better, is there any advice for women coming up that also have a family? Because you did this with a family, and that can be tough. So is there any advice for those of us that, my daughters, they're 8 and 10, how did you approach that with your daughter and raising a family at the same time as having this illustrious career?
I can say that I was not a poster child for work-life balance when my daughter was young, and I really wish I had paid more attention. There were times I did prioritize work over family, and I was very fortunate. My husband was very supportive, and we had the benefit of having his sister sort of as our nanny, so we had family to rely on. But
Mhm.
you think you're doing it all well, and everything is good, and I made it to that little play today, and I was there, relatively on time to pretty close. I was within a window of on-time pickup at different events, and but I would say the environment is so much more receptive now than it
Mm,
was in that 10 and 15 years ago. I mean, there was a time I didn't want to tell anybody that I was pregnant. I didn't want to even talk about the fact that I had a family, none of that, because the
mm.
environment really wasn't conducive to that. But now I would say be open. Let folks know what you're trying to accomplish, and all of the things that you have going on, and encourage your male counterparts to do the same. We are
Yes.
all trying to balance a lot, and we should all acknowledge and recognize that work is one component, an important component, but one component of our overall self. And if you're truly going to bring your overall self to work, then you need to feel comfortable talking about your family and the fact that today I need to leave at 5 o'clock, because I need to, be on time for this. And I found, even as my daughter was grown, I was in a meeting at Home Depot and just dreading the fact that it was going long on a Friday when she was flying in. And I should have just said up front, just wanted to let you know, Amanda's flying in. I need to be out of here by 5. If the meeting's still going on, I'm going to call in from the car. And, but I didn't do that. And instead,
Mm.
there's like the angst. And then you stop listening, you stop participating. And I am positive if I would have said anything, probably the entire group would have said, yes, let's wrap this up. It would have been a favor for everyone. But, at whatever reason, I didn't choose to handle it that way. But so I would just encourage folks to be very upfront and vocal in terms of what's going on in your world, and how you need to be supported, and how you will support others in a similar situation.
Yeah, I mean, and we kind of talked about relationships earlier. Your work, it's a relationship there. Just like you want to have boundaries with your significant other, there's boundaries that you can enforce in your work life as well. And like I've kind of moved away from work-life balance to say work-life integration. And maybe that's because, there's been, big shift on working, remotely, and that helps, I think, in some of that integration aspect. But um that's been like a big mind shift for me. So if I'm on the road, I'm very much like more laser focused, than when I'm like having to balance maybe, bath time.
Right, exactly,
you know?
exactly. Yes, I like your word, work-life integration. I also use the word harmony. All I know is there's
Mm,
no such thing as balance. So,
yes.
over a long period of time, you may have balance, but on any given day, week, month, or year, you are lucky to harmonize it and make it all work. And it will most likely not be balanced, but it will ebb and flow, and
Yeah.
you need to feel comfortable with that ebb and flow.
I love that. That I like the word harmony. I think that's absolutely brilliant. Now we've had this really great conversation, and those of you who listen or watch on repeat, you know I have my pen. I'm always writing, kind of little tidbits, things that resonate with me that I think would resonate with other listeners. So, the things that I wrote down was, really around how your career started, and it started with that with your father, and you know imparting knowledge, even though you didn't know knowledge was being imparted, allowed you to see that, hey, supply chain could be a really interesting space to be in. And you can stand out because, there were few women in the industry and you already came with knowledge you didn't even know you had. So that whole aspect of your kids are always listening, they're always watching, can be a really good thing from a future career perspective. We talked a little bit too about how the relationship piece in supply chain is really, really huge. That's either if you're on the customer side or the carrier side or the tech side, wherever you are, having and fostering really valuable relationships and valuing what others bring to the table is going to help you in the long run. It's going to allow you to collaborate better in the long run, find opportunities to really learn and create shared goals across, different silos within organizations can actually help you really win in your career. We talked about how, you know, within teams, when you can create emotional safety, which is once again a aspect of a really strong, healthy relationship, your team is going to be willing to come to the table and say, hey, I got some bad news. And that allows you to really work with them to maybe help find a better solution. We talk about don't waste a good crisis, right? And you don't, because there's some really cool opportunities. That's where real innovation happens, is when there is a crisis, and then creating that environment for people to be willing to say, hey, I got a problem, let's work together to get to the root cause. And talked a little bit about the future potential in the supply chain transportation industry, and about how AI and generative AI is probably going to have the biggest impact. So if people are interested in working with you, they're interested in learning more, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Probably on LinkedIn. So my profile's out there, and I'm happy to talk to you about really anything. That's one of the things I really enjoy, is connecting with people in the industry. And if I can help you out, by all means, check out my LinkedIn, send me a message, and we'll figure out how to connect.
Yes, thank you again so much, Michelle, for joining us on Might in Motion today. It's been a pleasure.
Um, Thank you, Mariana. Thank you for all you do and for giving back to the industry in this way. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Might in Motion. Remember, every step forward counts, and the power to create momentum starts with you. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It makes a huge difference. Until next time, stay inspired, stay mindful, and keep moving with might.